Of course.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do, just so you guys are aware, we do not have a quorum tonight. And so because of that, we're just going to have an informal meeting because there's no action items. So Marcy and Mr. Kramer went to a lot of work for this presentation, so we're going to go forward with it. And with that, we'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So with that, then we don't need to adopt the agenda, or well, we can't. So,
Yep.
okay,
We don't have any actions. We'll just,
we're off rails tonight. So,
we'll just have them start our presentation on proposed recalibration on the Senate file 81. And we'll go ahead and get started with kind of the new information. So you are aware, the bill is gone in front or was passed through the Senate and is in the House right now after second reading today. So there will be a third reading on that bill. There has been a number of changes that have kind of dramatically shifted some of the things, many for the positive for our school district, but there are still some that are rather concerning. And so Marcy and I are going to go over kind of what we know now. Because of the length of the bill and a lot of the things that are in there, it's very tough to really get a exact number. So in some cases, you'll see us rounding numbers, not necessarily because of because of having that estimate. And so those might change quite dramatically, but we'll try to get the highlights of what the things are that are positive for us and what the things that are still remaining that are slightly concerning for us. So Marcy, if you want to start off with some of this.
What I'd like to lead off as far as a caveat is that what I have numbers for is based upon what the recalibration bill left the Senate as. It's now in the House. There's some amendments and we can talk through some of the amendments, but I think it's going third reading tomorrow. I'm guessing. I haven't looked. I haven't seen the schedule yet, but until it gets third reading, we won't really know what all can or may or will happen in the House. I did spend the last day and a half in Cheyenne with fellow business managers. It was our winter meeting, and there's a lot of conversation in the districts, as there should be. The most popular word heard throughout the last day and a half is uncertainty. Just based upon either the vagueness of the bill and interpretation of the bill, as well as just the not knowing. So we are all kind of in the same boat. I guess that's good. What I have here is a comparison, and you're going to see, and I can project it. There is an LSO document, and I should share with you. There's an LSO document floating around that the legislature likes to touch on, and it's comparing. It's comparing, and I'm struggling with it because I don't feel like it's a fair or accurate comparison. But what it is comparing is the what they refer to as current law versus what they're calling right now the engrossed model, being what went through the Senate. And Goshen County School District is down here a little ways. we're right here. You're going to hear the legislature say, "Oh, Goshen County is going to gain $2 million, $2,060,000." What they're doing with that is they're saying that in comparing the engrossed or the Senate version to the current law, we're going to gain $2 million. And I've really held firm with Mr. Kramer, and I've said this isn't accurate. It's not the picture, it's not the message that I want to present. What I want to present and what I think tells a better picture is the document that I just had up here on the screen. And this document is comparing what we're receiving today for the current year versus what we would receive next year if recalibration goes through as plotted. And we have to look at it as the model, and then we have to look at the categorical side of it. The highlighted items in yellow are the categorical pieces. And to be honest, that's where we have a lot of heartburn. That's where there's a lot of conversation with the legislature. JD Williams is trying really hard to take care of that instructional silo, but thus far he hasn't been able to. That instructional silo is providing us with a pot of money that has to be used exclusively for that instructional purpose. So we have two principals sitting out here. Principals and superintendents are not part of that instructional silo. That's really hard when they're the instructional leaders or the ones that are supposed to be leading the charge of curriculum in the district, and they're not classified as instructional.
Well, actually, I think ironically, there's not a school district employee in this room that falls under the instructional model or on the instructional silo. So every person in this room that works to do the things that are different behind the scenes would not fall into this silo to be able to afford. So that's some of that big pieces that makes it much more difficult to service.
What is that?
So instructional aids are included, and so there has been some confusion related to a lot of these terms that are being used down there. There was more specification today that the paraeducators who are paid out of the general fund would be included in the instructional silo.
With their
So that will be left up to the district in regards to, they did take away the caveat of not funding for experience and those type of things in years of service. So what you're seeing there in regards to Ms. Kate's fiscal year 27, where that instructional silo has been pulled out of the model generated. So fiscal year 26, out of that 26 million, those other categorical areas, that's what's making up that amount. So it's not really exact how this may affect us, but we know that it certainly will have to be part of the conversation when looking at salary relations and saying, this is how much money we have towards this, and this is how much money we have towards these positions, which will kind of, as I explained to our legislators, and I don't know if it's really truly the intent, but Wyoming schools will look different if this goes through. They will not look the same. There's no way to maintain the same principles that we've been working under for the last 20 years when you start to categorize these pieces. It's going to dramatically shift some of the pieces that individual districts are going to have to look like. And that's where I think there's just a real heartburn still from many who don't understand the model from last year when there was this interpretation that passing it at the legislative level that an 8.5% increase meant that there was going to be an 8.5% increase on teachers' base salaries. That's still not how the system works, and that's it is a complicated system. It is not as easy as saying at the state level that this number needs to be put into the salaries, because the dramatic difference of where that starting point is. You're talking about the model, which existed with a $43,000 base, or
Yeah.
45?
43.
43.
$43,000 base, and our base being at 50, is it 50?
56.
Yeah, 56. So if you're talking about 8.5% on 43,000, 8.5% on 56,000 is not the same number. So that doesn't equate even from that starting point. Even if we stayed with the exact same way it has been calculated in the past, that misunderstanding of information really complicates things and makes it more difficult. But I'll go back to Marcy kind of explaining some of the more intricate pieces
But
here.
even as recent as today, that 8.5% argument is still occurring on the floor of the House.
Mhm.
It's just crazy.
So that $2 million that I showed you, it appears to be more like $1.7 million as to our increase in funding. Of that increase in funding, we have the instructional silo, retirement would be categorical as well. And then the CTE categorical grant, we did receive that money this year. We'll receive it next year if it stays intact. That is just for high school CTE. So there again, it's for a particular purpose. What we have with these, and this this version, when we met with our legislatures, we talked about the 79% variance against the employment world, if you will, comparing like positions. It was increased to 85%. So that's reflected in these numbers getting that increased.
So Marcy, that's basically, just in layman's terms, the 85% is that they work 85% of a year compared to others in the employment market.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's still there still isn't, and they're using the term linchpin. That's what they're talking about in regards to the 8.5%. But there's these couple of things that they really are not willing to budge on, and one of them being that a teacher or an educator is not working 12 months out of the year, and this is their way to adjust for that.
Marcy, I just want to make sure and clarify why the number 1.75 is a more accurate indication of what we will be getting, as opposed to that $2 million number from the LSO. As I understand it, when they're making that comparison, they're making it a comparison to the previous proposed recalibration. Is that accurate in saying that? And so that's why from the previous proposed recalibration to the engrossed model, it was a $2 million increase. We are looking at it for our standpoint as the district. It is much more reliable for us to look at the number that we received last year in regards to funding compared to this year, because it's not 2 million, it's 1.75 million that we will receive. And we're not comparing because we never got the original recalibration dollars. These are the dollars that, well, 1.75 is what we would have in comparison. And that's an important number, as you'll kind of see below as we kind of talk about, because even with that, that's a deceiving number also. So that is the original, that is what's left of that 26 million from the top. So in fiscal year 26, there was 26.8 million in the block grant. So then by taking the other pieces, the retirement categorical grant, the instructional silo piece out of that 26, 14 million is what's remaining for all the rest to pay for all the rest outside of those siloed items.
That 14.5 is what we have to pay for the non-instructional staff, as well as those items not funded in the model. Really, that is what we're accustomed to when we think about what education funding in Wyoming has looked like. It's been that block grant, and this instructional silo is totally new to us. As we talked last time, the salaries, I think Mr. Kramer alluded to the fact the experience in education still is off the board. So it's based on an average salary. With that average salary in that instructional silo, there still is that potential for districts to have a reserve where they're dictating what our average in our salary schedule is to look like versus what our calculated average salary is based upon the employees actually working in the district. So they're trying to further control and manage what we're paying in regards to our staff. And it's going to become difficult if the silo stays and if we have certified and classified people in that silo, because right now, if all we have is certified teachers, it's going to be really easy to work through what's the average for that schedule. If we have to do the same thing with our classified schedule, which is going to be probably column 52, it's going to be a little bit harder. One of the other things that no one has said is what are the ramifications aside from the extra money going into this reserve account? What are the ramifications to the district? And that's part of the vagueness of this whole recalibration process and bill. Moving on a little bit, we did see a plus in that ADM will be calculated at present based upon a 2-year average. We liked the 3, but it's better than just the prior year. So that is a win. The external cost adjustment that was going to be biannual, that went in as an amendment to be annual or every year. I do want, and I should have shared this caveat from the beginning. What I'm talking about right here is what the Senate version of the recalibration bill. It's in the House. The House and the Senate are going to have to come to agreement to accepting this. So what the House accepts and what the Senate accepts may not be the same version. Minimum teachers did go to 17 for those small schools. That was huge. That's our co-located schools where we see that Lingle and Southeast. Middle school electives, they did increase that from 20% to 33.33%. So they're taking a priority in the electives at the middle school level. And then there is talk. I've not seen it, but there is potential that nurses and counselors may be funded in the first year. If that happens, the mental health grant that we would receive will go away. And then the other piece of good news in the House at present time is that the mandate to the state health plan went away, which, I mean, that was a whole piece of local control.
For a year, right?
No.
Totally went away.
Totally.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kramer, before I move down to some of the variances, do you want to talk any more about any of those items?
No, I think one of the things I did want to point out, though, on the CTE categorical grant, this is one of those situations where best of intentions don't line up. Because of Perkins and some of the other CTE funding, equipment is not necessarily something in the area of CTE that we're short of. as some districts are, and some districts had a voice in that. They really pushed their legislatures to get this categorical grant. On our side, we need it for staff. I would love to expand our staff our offerings for CTE. In that categorical grant, we may not use it for staffing. And that really hurts us because that would be something that would be, you're gonna see at some point in time us having a situation where we're going to be purchasing some items coming up here for CTE, and they're going to be larger amounts for purchase. This is going to be out of that categorical grant, and some of those purchases are going to be what nice to have as opposed to need to have because the money is there.
So also to point out, this funding shared here is exclusive of transportation and special ed. Those two right now at present are 100% reimbursable. So the special ed staff that are in our buildings, they're not part of that instructional silo. They're standing over on a reimbursement here, and that's not included in here because it simply is prior year expenditures or received the following year. The other thing before we talk variances that did come out of the Senate version of the bill, there was money put in there for dual enrollment, that being helping us to offset that negativity, the negative balance that we will see with our BOCES funds. So that was a huge win to help with. Some districts needed it for concurrent. Ours was needed for the dual, but that will be allocated to all the districts, and that is a huge win for us.
And that went into effect due to we were a shortfall because of the property tax reduction of the 25%. So BOCES and those mill levies that were a part of that have a reduction in funds. And so we did not have as much funds as we had in previous years. And so this takes care of that cost run over that we've had. So that, again, Marcy stated it very well. That was a big win for us in regards to being able to pay for those. Because unfortunately, we would have had to have been looking at limiting offerings for those courses in the future if that was not a part of the funding model.
So a couple of negative variances in how the funding looks to be applied. The insurance ghost employees still appear to be part of it. We're not sure if the first year would be based upon the total number funded and potentially ghost employees go away the second year. We don't know where that would be, but that appears to be 62 FTEs not taking insurance at $20,000 a piece. That's $1.2 million that we lose. And then they did rebase our utilities funding, and this one is hard because utilities had not been reevaluated for a very long time. And what they did is they took our prior year actual, which totally makes sense. Districts build new buildings, they become more efficient. Because we are building bigger buildings, our cost of utilities has gone down. That $896,230 is our prior year utility costs. That's what we will receive for utilities. However, because we were receiving based upon prior year utility allocations, that's $625,000 that we're going to lose. That's a hard one to argue. And then we still have the interest money, the interest earnings in general fund, that that one is not being amended. That one hasn't been altered. We look to lose 50% of that, $175,000. Those three items total $2 million. That if funding had stayed intact and the model not been recalibrated, those dollars would have remained in the model.
So can you give us some examples of what, like, the 1.2 million and the 625,000, what were those monies used for? Because, you know, like, it's understandable, right, that they don't want to pay for ghost employees, they don't want to pay, you know, for utilities, you know, yada yada, right? Like, that stuff all makes sense, but I think what's really hard is to wrap our minds around, like, why does that impact us, right? If that's not really monies that we are quote unquote deserve or entitled to, how does that impact us? And I think that, Marcy, if you could, or even Mr. Kramer, if you guys could help to explain, like, how we use those monies to pay for other things and why this instructional silo is just so scary for us.
You know, Lena and I have not talked before this presentation, but it looks like we did.
We did.
Because here are 4 items totaling $1.3 million.
Fantastic.
Our SROs are not funded. There's 2.25 employees at $130,000. Our food service contribution with CEP, that's $500,000. And there's no contribution to food service. They keep talking about that being an interim topic. Activities have not changed in that activities we were funded at the individual school level, and they moved that to a district allocation. In doing so, their district allocation is not covering what we actually spend on activities. And this is not the bus driver or the cost of the bus going down the road. This is the cost of supplies, registration for those sports that have those kind of things. This is travel. This is our teams going to culminating events, as we just sent them, you know, last week, and we'll be sending teams for the next 2 weeks, but that's short about $500,000. And then without that BOCES money, we look to be short $250,000 this year on the cost of dual enrollment. So
the dual enrollment is one of those pieces that at least has been addressed. The other 3 have not been addressed. The concerning factor that I have on the activities expenses is my hope is that we will this weekend have 6 teams staying in hotels. Not as a district. We're not just having 2. We have some district teams, but most of our other sports, we have 3 teams. So we have 6 teams staying in hotels this weekend because we have that many teams. And that's part of the reason that we have that deficit. And so then when you take that, if you just want to scroll up to the 1.2 on insurance, you take that factor of the elimination of insurance. It isn't a slush fund. There's no slush money out there where we're able to just put some things out there to, you know, have dollars spent. Those dollars are being used. That 1.2 million is allocated somewhere. It is not just sitting out there building up on our percentage. We've actually decreased our carryover every year to go towards kids. I don't know where that is coming into the idea of there's just these slush funds and they haven't been using them correctly. To me, it's because you're not asking questions. The legislatures are not asking questions of where these dollars are. There isn't a different account. We get evaluated on that board. 9 board members have all of those reports to evaluate where those dollars go. And then that piece is really important also, because when you make that comparison to the state plan, so on average since 2017 to 2025, the state plan has had a 3% increase in insurance. If you can find a 3% increase in the last 9 years on your insurance, man, you were doing something great. You cannot possibly say that that was not manipulated in order to reduce what that ECA was going to be. That it is clearly obvious. So what they did for the last 9 years is manipulate their own state insurance program so they didn't have to increase the insurance costs. And now, because they've been angry that they were paying for more of the employees than we're taking the insurance, they're going to get rid of those ghost employees. That 1.2 million wasn't going to something on the top. That was going towards the insurance cost, because on our market, the average was 7.5% every year for insurance costs. We've had that increase, and that's significant, with the potential for another large increase this year, which gets a little bit scary in regards to the insurance piece. And the idea of what that block model does and what that money allocates. So when you go up to even further and you look at that 1.7 million that we were supposed to have, that's going to increase, that immediately gets taken away from the 1.2 loss. And so now we look at 500,000 possibly, even if just the insurance reduction, lanes, steps, and a 1% salary increase is a $450,000 cost for the district. That's it. 1% on the base.
And where do we get it?
And that's it.
Well, and a dilemma is with this instructional silo. One of the caveats was, districts didn't use the 8.5 as they wanted us to use it for professional salaries. In doing so, there's this caveat language that our salary schedules have to align with the average salary, and there's going to be requirements for increases to the salary schedule. Well, when we only have 1.7 million in an increase, it's going to be hard to, take care of all of their mandates.
Everyone has slight differences in, especially that the items not funded. When you look at Campbell County in regards to their expenses and their revenue for extracurriculars, that could be a completely different number than what we have. It probably is, because of the number of students and the number that generates. So that number would probably look different. BOCES for dual enrollment. So those four on the bottom probably look dramatically different than Campbell County, but that's also not to say that they have some additional ones that we're not showing. So they could have, be doubling up on elementary counselors and saying we need twice as many elementary counselors that are in place. And so that those different things could be, and the other piece is there is a balance. There are really good things in this recalibration bill. I do not want to say it is just terrible, horrible. There are things that will help us as a district. And so it is greatly appreciated, the work that they have done. It's the other pieces and the drastic change we're moving towards that is going to make this job a lot more difficult to fund, as opposed to the block grant and the way we've been funding insurance. Those two things right there make it just a much more difficult job than it needs to be, because we just make this drastic change. And so that is really, those two changes would have a huge impact on us having the liberty to say and prioritize on the bottom, because those are choices. The bottom ones are decisions, not easy ones, but they are decisions that we can make and control locally. But when you take that large amount out of that ability to maneuver, that makes that even more difficult and puts you into a corner of where we can only use these dollars towards this. And it makes it much more difficult on the question of that 1.2 million for those ghost employees, as to whether that's implemented this year, if that's implemented next year. Because if that's implemented next year and you take a look at our bottom line and we have an additional 1.2 million, it's not real good optics when we don't put that towards salaries and benefits. But we also know we're going to be on a cliff the very next year, because we're going to lose 1.2 million. And the same way with, do you invest on teachers, adding more staff for 1 year? That's not real good fiscal management either, for just 1 year and hiring a bunch of new staff, or trying to, because the pool is limited also. So it just makes it that much more difficult on what they're doing. And it seems to be personal vendettas rather than quality legislation.
But you talk about like, you know, are Campbell County's numbers the same or Niobrara's? No, like that's the point, right? And that's what they're taking from us is that local control. That we as 9 elected, you know, board members, we lose that control to make the decision for what is best for our students, our staff, and our district. They're completely taking that from us. 100%.
Why are we not hearing more from other districts? Like, why
We're hearing a ton.
are we?
There's a
Okay.
ton of
Okay.
chatter going on right now.
Okay.
The problem is when you listen to the legislation, it is incredibly frustrating because there's so much misunderstanding on their part. Even the terminology, it blows your mind because they're not understanding it. Yet they're the ones making these decisions. Very few of them are going out like JD is and speaking with, you know, the superintendent or the board or what have you.
Mhm.
And instead they're making the decisions. And it's very scary. It's very upsetting and disturbing because these things like are big.
Yeah.
What are we going to do if we lose this money for all of these things? Like, where's the money going to come from? You know, it doesn't just magically appear. There's also this misunderstanding that like for the ghost employees and stuff, that this 1.2 million, it didn't go in anybody's pockets, right? Like we're paying for things that the district needed from those monies. It doesn't go in the district's bank account and collect a bunch of interest or anything like that. Like it went to another need. We're losing that ability to determine what needs we want to take care of.
So, but I guess that seems so, it's such a logical argument. Why can't they see that? That's what I don't understand.
There's just so much misinformation and
Yeah.
things because and blame. It's like, well, I know, and it's been said to me, I know you do a really good job, but I don't trust Campbell County or Laramie One or those big districts because they don't know where. Yes, they do. It just looks different, and you have to ask the right question because I've worked with those people. There isn't this, lack of, and there's these dramatic differences. We're not a recapture district. We don't have a situation like Campbell County where they're writing a $32 million check to the state because they've been receiving these dollars and they have to have this percentage of carryover because if they didn't have 15, 20% of carryover, they couldn't write that check to the state that they're responsible for. That's dramatically different than Goshen County. We don't have to write that check. So we're able to stay very consistent throughout the year on our carryover. Every district is so dramatically different. And two, I mean, you look at Teton County. Teton County is the richest location in the United States per capita. How do you place that? It's even difficult as they had challenges today, even articulating how dramatically different that is for funding purposes. And they're going to be looking at litigation because they reeled back some of those changes into this hedonic wage index. And Teton County is going to be on the losing end of that. And it's going to dramatically affect this concern about court cases, which I am very concerned about. And I think they're moving in the right direction, but they're also still just holding on to these vendettas that they believe are there, and they just need to ask more questions because I think just very similarly with JD and the communication that we've had with our local legislatures has been better this year, but there's still a number of questions that need to be asked. So they are very astute in some of these subjects because it is very, very meaningful. And I continue to hear how much of the state budget goes to education. Well, then as a legislature, that has to be one of your highest priorities to educate yourself. If it's that big of a percentage of your budget, you should be highly, highly educated on all those things that are related to the funding model.
But that is not happening. Instead, terminology like slush fund and those types of things are being used, which just shows you a complete misunderstanding for how things work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why it's happening. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So with Friday's committee amendments, one huge win did occur when we met with the legislatures and talked through that 233% for the superintendent's salary, that cap. that did go away. And there also was an amendment that had some additional reporting where districts had to be able to justify any changes from budget to actual that were greater than 7.5%. And that went away. So that has happened in the House. As far as first and second reading, I don't feel versed enough to speak about those amendments.
And really many of them have failed.
Yeah.
So there have not been many major changes.
The other document that I put together that I think is worth sharing, you can see much of that 1,700,000 that we've talked about is at the school levels. And I just did this based upon current year funding versus the recalibration outside of the Senate. With this, we have current year funding, student ADM, and then FTE, and then likewise there's your recalibration funding, ADM and FTE, and a couple of them that I think are important to notate. Lingle 6 through 12 with the co-location, they do lose $25,000. Southeast K through 12 does gain, but they're looking differently at the elementary as opposed to the secondary, and this has no activities money in it. But that's just a brief snapshot, and this is totally subject to change.
So Marcy, on the ADM, is that based off the 2-year average where their ADM is lower than?
Yes. Yes. It was a 3-year average and then a 2-year average. And that's based upon an October snapshot that undoubtedly come May it will change.
And then on the FTEs, is that based off of the ADM or based off of their change in that model as well?
That is based upon the 2-year average and what the model generates based upon the number of FTEs for the positions that are funded.
So if we wanted to retain those 7 positions, we would have to,
Those are included
they're what?
in there. Well, they're with because that's included in the general fund, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So with the siloing, that won't affect that, or that will
Correct.
affect that?
It will not affect that because those are also in the silo.
They're protected inside. Okay,
Does that make sense?
nope.
I know.
So
But
it's
they're calculating the FTE, but they're still gonna fund.
so they also calculate based on the district. Also, so like central office also has an allocation based on the district as a whole.
Okay,
And so we get allocated those based on a district FTE allocation for each
Okay.
position. So we're also allocated in regards to instructional facilitators, directors.
outside of the instructional
Mhm.
silo.
It's actually, well, instructional facilitators are included in the instructional silo. Directors, superintendents, principals are outside of the instructional silo. But we're still allocated dollars the same way we're allocated dollars for custodians, secretaries, but that is outside of that instructional silo.
Okay. And does that
So,
then limit
actually,
your ability
back
to
to
move
that
those between
original sheet.
buildings within our district?
No.
We can still do that. Okay.
Yep. And that's why there are still some pieces
Mhm.
that are open to
Okay.
being able for the board to have decisions on. So there's still some liberty. So if you want to go back up to that very top. So that's that top line fiscal year 27 model to generate as block grant 14 million.
Okay.
So that's where any of those outside of the secretary, custodian,
Would fall under
extracurricular.
that.
Yep, they fall in there. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And when you look at the school, they're not telling us we have to spend on that school. That just is what the model is generating for each of those schools.
Cause at one time we were showed numbers where it made it look like they would give us, what was it, like 3.5 teachers in
Yeah.
Southeast Elementary?
That was.
So did that go away?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they did 17 per school.
And that still does affect some of the other co-located schools that are slightly larger than our two. That makes it much more difficult for them because they're still maxed out at 17 because their numbers don't
Sure.
go above that. We're fortunate to where Southeast and Lingle are right into that 17 staff members K through 12.
So it just didn't hurt us as bad as we thought it was going to.
Okay.
Yeah. It's still not ideal because on the administrative side, that's where we get hit because there was an allocation for more FTE on the administration and office personnel.
Mhm.
And now that is reduced going to the co-located. So there is definite some reduction there.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other pieces that you think we need to share?
Not from my viewpoint.
So if this goes through as it is right now, let's just, without any amendments or anything, our next option is a line item veto with the governor
Correct. Yep.
so we would need to be calling the governor's office and writing letters and.
That would be the next step if there are still those concerns out there that aren't addressed. And I think the story matters because our story is unique. You know, not every district has the same story. Some of them might not be as dramatic on the insurance piece. Theirs might look a little bit different. The co-located schools might be a bigger impact to other like Shoshone that has a similar situation, but maybe has more students in their buildings, and so that's where it gets a little bit more difficult as we progress. And I do want to state I appreciate the work that has been put into this in comparison to what was started, because what started that would have had devastating effects, and so there has been some movement. The challenge that I've faced with this legislative session was we started off the legislative session with the sky is falling, we're broke. What happened to that message? It's gone. So that didn't last long enough, so we couldn't make that argument. That's frustrating when you enter in there and it's a game. It doesn't become a game here. That's not acceptable when we start playing those games going into the session and then completely change the narrative. And that's why I don't want to also be someone who would cry wolf. And this is the worst case scenario recalibration. There are some really, really good things coming out here that will help our district. Mm-hmm. But there are two things that will negate some of that really good work.
So if it comes to us this way, governor doesn't do anything, it comes to us this way, what is our plan? And this may be a premature question we don't have an answer for, and that's fine. But do we have a plan for what we'll do for activities and food service and SRO and BOCES? I mean, do we have a?
And so that would be an extended conversation after we kind of are able to quantify truly everything,
right? Okay.
And see where we land. Because I don't want to speculate, because I think sometimes you can fall into a trap where the information coming out of the 120 pages that are part of this bill, to truly digest it and really truly understand. I think LSO is even struggling with some of the things in trying to explain when this insurance dollars come in, when they're not taken out, because of so many different things. But what the process then comes down to is this fall, we have a conversation about what are the truly valuable things that are non-negotiable outside of the instructional silo, and say, okay, here is the dollars that we have. What do those accomplish? And does it meet our entire list? Or do we have to stay, okay, this has to look different than it's looked in the past?
I think that tonight is step one.
Yeah.
To be honest, just to start having the conversation, and then we as a board have to discuss.
Appreciate doing this because every time I think I have a grasp of it,
Oh,
then I something else comes out. I'm like, I have no, I'm totally lost again, you know? I can't,
Just watch the house for 30 minutes.
I know, keep up. I cannot keep up.
It is, it's crazy.
And I think it's important that we have these conversations because I don't think our constituents and people in the community, I mean, they don't have to necessarily wrap their heads around this because they're relying on us to do that. But I think it's important for them to hear this conversation because there's no way. I had someone this weekend at the basketball game ask me about, and I was like, I can't really explain it. I mean, I have an idea how it is in my head, but I literally cannot articulate it. So I think it's important to have these conversations and.
I would agree.
Yeah.
We don't have to adjourn, but I do have some specific items that I'd like to speak with 4 of you members with.
Okay.
But we'll let everyone else, since we don't have a quorum.
Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate it. With that, we're unofficially adjourning.
Unofficially.
That was. Meeting in 28 years.